our LGBTQ citizens.
So if Caitlyn Jenner were to walk into Trump Tower and want to use the bathroom, you would be fine with her using any bathroom she chooses?
That is correct. And I think it's pretty simple. Let the states decide.
The U.S. will not accept or allow transgender people to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Trump said in a series of tweets Wednesday he consulted with generals and military experts on the issue. And he added the military should focus on, quote, decisive and overwhelming victory and not the, quote, tremendous medical cost and disruption that he says transgender people would entail. Trump's announcement comes a little more than a year after then Secretary of Defense Ash Carter lifted the ban on transgender people openly serving in the military. The Pentagon was supposed to start letting transgender recruits enlist this year. But last month, current Defense Secretary Jim Mattis said he was delaying the new policy because he needed more time. Transgender people already serve in the military, and it's not yet clear how Trump plans to enforce the new ban.
Some breaking news for you now. President Trump has announced his intention to ban transgender people from serving in the U.S. military. The president tweeted this morning this quote, "After consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail." Thank you. Let us bring in Rachel Bade. She is a congressional reporter for Politico, and she joins me now from Capitol Hill. Your focus is health, so we're really happy to have you. Rachel, let me start with getting your initial reaction to this announcement from the president via Twitter.
So there's a really interesting backstory to these tweets about banning transgender troops. Healthcare in Russia has sort of taken up the spotlight in the news this week, but there's actually been this sort of under-the-radar fight going on in the House over a small funding package that would give the military a boost in spending and also fund the wall. There are conservatives and traditional Republicans who want to add an amendment that basically bars the Pentagon from using money, medical allowances, to allow troops to get sex changes if they decide that they're transgender. And so this debate has been raging behind closed doors. People are threatening to not vote for this bill unless they get this amendment in there. They've been working with the White House quietly to try to get these members on board because moderates obviously do not want to do this because they are concerned that people will be discriminated against. But with these tweets, basically Trump is coming out and taking this a step further. He is saying that he's going to ban transgender troops from serving in the military. That is not the question, from my understanding, here in the House, but it seems like, he took this a little bit further than the House was looking for him to go, and here is what we have today.
So let's just remind people about what the timeline has been. It was about a year ago that it was announced that the ban on transgender people serving openly in the military was going to be lifted. But it's taken about a year, and the military sort of had a year-long timeline to actually start accepting transgender people, which only just started at the beginning of this month.
That's exactly right. And I think that's why you're hearing this debate right now in the House when they're talking about funding the Pentagon. You have a bunch of conservatives and more traditional Republicans. In fact, most of the House Republican Conference supports this proposal that would basically prohibit insurance from paying for sex changes for troops that are transgender. But then you have a group of moderates here in the House and centrist Republicans who basically they've already tanked this amendment on the floor. Conservatives tried to offer it last week to a defense authorization, and they were not able to get it through because moderates teamed up with Democrats, and the House spoke its will, and yet some conservatives want to come back and try to do this again. So just sort of laying the groundwork here, that's why we're hearing all this debate right now, as you mentioned.
So what is the argument about the expense, just how much it's going to cost? As I understand it, we're talking about 0.1% of the 2 million or so people who are serving in the military.
Absolutely. It's a very, very small percentage when you look at overall medical expenses. However, you talk to someone like Vicky Hertzler, who is the person who is sponsoring this amendment in the House, or Trent Franks, an ardent conservative from Arizona, also supporting this provision. And they say taxpayer dollars shouldn't be going to a, quote, social, how do they phrase it? An experiment, social experiment for the far left is how Trent Franks explains it to me. However, you're absolutely right. It's a very small portion. And of course, a lot of people coming into the military, it's not like they join the military and say, oh, I want the military to pay for my, my gender reassignment surgery.
Consulting with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming. And it looks like there's going to be more to come. Congressman Kingston, as someone who worked on the Trump campaign as a fellow Republican, what is your response?
Well, I think that the lead of the statement is that he's listened to his military advisors, which is one of the criticisms from the left and the right often that the president gets, is that he doesn't listen to the key people, whether they're in the intel community or local law enforcement or whatever. So this is a case where he's actually saying, I've sat down, I've heard their concerns, and I want to say one other thing as a Republican, taking a step back. At the Republican convention last July, he was the first nominee in the history of our party to talk about LGBTQ from the platform of the state arena. And I think, he is a progressive guy. Ted Cruz accused him of having New York values, meaning far more tolerant. So I don't think it's a slam against transgender as much as practicality that his generals and his military leadership.
The new policy on transgender service members the president announced this morning. First, what happens to transgender service members now? Are they immediately thrown out of the military?
That's something that the Department of Defense and the White House will have to work together as implementation takes place and is done so lawfully.
So it's possible, because I see that, the president was pretty clear in his tweet that transgender individuals, he will not accept or allow a transgender individual to serve in any capacity. So does that mean that those that are now in theater, that are now deployed to Afghanistan, for example, will have to be immediately sent home and
Again,
discharged?
the implementation policy is going to be something that the White House and the Department of Defense have to work together to lawfully determine. And, I would imagine the Department of Defense will be the lead on that and keep you posted as that takes place.
Why did he decide to do this, given that during the campaign he had declared that he would protect the rights of transgender individuals? He said he would be better on this issue than Hillary Clinton. Now he's turned the clock back on this issue regarding the military.
The president has a lot of support for all Americans and certainly wants to protect all Americans at all times. The president's expressed concern since this Obama policy came into effect, but he's also voiced that this is a very expensive and disruptive policy, and based on consultation that he's had with his national security team, came to the conclusion that it erodes military readiness and unit cohesion. And
so if Caitlyn Jenner were to walk into Trump Tower and want to use the bathroom, you would be fine with her using any bathroom she chooses?
That is correct. And I think it's pretty simple. Let the states decide.
Minnesota. They're putting in place a so-called transgender toolkit, which advises teachers to call students scholars instead of boys and girls, and instead of a prom king and queen, prom ambassadors. Here's the explanation why. They say schools should not assume a student's name or pronoun. When students are referred to by the wrong pronoun by peers or school staff, students may feel intimidated, threatened, harassed, or bullied. Joining us now with his reaction is Minnesota State Representative Tim Miller, who is fighting actively against this particular measure. Representative, thanks for being here this morning. So, first of all, do you believe the rationale given for this, and how are Minnesotans responding to it?
Well, thanks for having me this morning, Pete. I really feel like common sense has sort of left the room, and the Department of Education is really focusing on something that is not supported by the people of Minnesota.
So what's the agenda here? I mean, are there so many transgender children being bullied in Minnesota that this is a massive problem that they feel like they need to react to?
Pete, unfortunately, this has been an agenda that has been going on for about 4, maybe 5 years now in Minnesota, and we're told conflicting things. One time I've said there's only a few kids throughout the entire state of Minnesota, so why is someone like me speaking out against these poor kids But then when I asked why are we putting together very serious, broad sweeping policy across the state of Minnesota, why are we doing that when there's only a few students? And they say, well, there's students coming up all the time and they're just being bullied, and so we need to put this policy in place.
Well, my father's an athletic director in Minnesota. He's had to deal with issues like this, locker rooms, boys, girls. Usually those closest to an issue are able to address it with common sense most effectively. Why is it that the left always feels like they need to go to massive directives based on a social agenda?
Well, I think that's exactly it, Pete. There's a social agenda. And my concern is that the responsibility of schools is to ensure the safety and privacy of all students. And when you have an agenda like this that is being pushed in the state for a very small, distinct group, you are not serving the broader base of all the students.
Well, State Representative Tim Miller, thanks for joining us this morning. I can say as someone who was born and raised in Minnesota watching the show today, we have got this segment. You got Betsy Hodges. What is happening in Minnesota? Maybe folks like you can put it back on the rails. And our viewers, email us about this topic, friends@foxnews.com. Is this the kind of policy you want to see in your school? Interested to read some of those. Well, still ahead.
The most controversial topics right now is the transgender public bathroom policy across the states. Over the last few months, we have heard a lot about President Trump's decision to reverse the guidelines former President Obama set. Those guidelines required public schools to allow students to use the bathroom that fits with their gender identity. But with President Trump's reversal, it is now up to each and every state to decide what they want to do about the restrooms in their public school systems. Dina Cutford joins us right now. So what about the states, Dina? Where do they stand individually?
So, Megan, according to UCLA School of Law, about 150,000 kids ages 13 to 17 do identify as transgender here in the United States. But when it comes to the United States, this map shows that we're pretty split. We're pretty divided. North Carolina is the only state that made it illegal to use a restroom based on someone's gender identity. And according to the National Conference of State Legislators and the Human Rights Campaign, 14 states plus D.C., so those that are in blue behind me, do currently have laws to protect transgender students' bathroom rights. But in 16 states, those that are in the pink on this map, they have legislation that is currently pending, protesting the bill and calling for stricter access. For the rest of the states, those in gray, no laws yet. Many of you have expressed concerns about this bill, and we have one local student story to share with you. Maya Worrell went to Folsom High School. Worrell was born a girl, but says they never really felt like one.
I was looking through a lot of different terms, and I saw agender, and then I looked at the definition, and I realized, wow, that really fits who I am personally.
Yeah, so Worrell never really felt comfortable going into the girls' bathroom or the boys'. Folsom High did have a gender-neutral bathroom, one with a single stall to make those who don't identify as their birth gender feel a little more comfortable.
I'm very thankful that I live in California, where obviously we're not perfect, but where there's a lot of kind of these things set in place that allow me to be able to just be myself.
And also, Megan, you might remember the Golden One Center was praised last year for its gender-neutral bathrooms.
Right.
That new arena has 23 single-occupancy restrooms that have been labeled as all gender. And if you want any more information about the bathroom,
on either one of these hallways that you can go to, and you can submit it that way. You just have to do your name and your address and such.
It seems to me that we have a bill here that clearly is discriminating based on gender. And so my question to you is, were you concerned at all that this is an unconstitutional bill?
I am not. While many have made this about a transgender bill, it's more about someone that will use this bill as an excuse to go into the most intimate places we find ourselves in. So I'm trying real hard, Senator, to have crafted a bill, working with lots of people to strike that balance.
Like, I'm dealing with health issues just having to be in public and hold my, stuff, and like I've literally had accidents multiple times because I didn't have anywhere to go, and I'm dealing with incontinence issues, and it continues to get worse because of that.
You see, the reason I'm so passionate about seeing this bill passed into law is because I myself was the victim of being videotaped by a hidden camera placed in a women's public bathroom stall by a man. The camera was was hidden in a small white plastic coat hook, exactly like the one I brought today to show you. Opening up bathrooms and locker rooms for boys to freely enter girls' facilities is a disaster waiting to happen.
In my heart, I do believe.
Are we still a society letting fear overrule humanity? Are we still a society that looks at another human and says, because of my perception of our differences, I cannot share my liberties with you?
The thought of my students, the little girls, my little third graders going to a restroom and there's a boy there.
You have issues on recess, you have issues down the hall, and now you're going to make it an issue in the restroom.
Psychologically, this bill is the definition of non-affirming. It communicates to transgender people that they do not belong. These are the two largest predictors of suicide, and quite literally, this bill is killing my patients.
New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has signed a law pandering to LGBT rhetoric. Signed Friday, the law is forcing schools to develop plans to respect the privacy of so-called transgender students by referring to them by their preferred gender and allowing them to use the bathroom of their choice, despite top pediatricians calling transition protocols child abuse. In 2013, Christie signed the law making New Jersey the first state in the country to ban reparative therapy for minors seeking to rid themselves of unwanted same-sex attraction.